Hey everybody. Hope you're having a good week. It is Wednesday. Some people call that hump day because it's the middle of the week. And I don't normally do this type of video. And I don't normally do bonus videos like this. But today, I felt like this was important enough that I have to get this video out there. And I will be uploading it to all 4 of my channels. And just doing everything I can to promote it, because the algorithm probably won't. And as you know by the title of the headline, it is why minority representation matters in the media. And this is going to be a long video because I'm going to not necessarily attack some people, but I am going to call people out for their bad behavior. Not individuals, but I'm going to call out what is bad behavior and explain to you why it's bad behavior and why you shouldn't be a bigot. But before you hear that word bigot and you think, oh, fuck you, because maybe you think you hear the word bigot. Listen, I'm going to explain this. You hear the word bigot and you think it's a blowhard with a Confederate flag tattooed on their, forearm, walking around saying the N-word all day long and calling us F-words and everything else. And you're like, yes, that is absolutely a bigot. That's the textbook bigot. But there are subtle forms of bigotry people don't own up to, that they need to be made aware of. And the reason why I mention that is because I know there are some good, well-intentioned people who don't realize that they're being harmful, because they probably do think they're being innocent. And it doesn't do us in the queer community any good to just call them a bigot and move on, because they get defensive and they're not willing to hear what we have to say. So, I'm not accusing anybody of that particular word at this moment in time, but I am going to spell out a few things that you might think are innocent that actually are harmful. And we're going to talk about why it is important for representation in the media, and why people who say things like, why should 4% of whatever of the population be overrepresented, or things like, I don't care if there's queer people on TV as long as they're not, quote, pushing an agenda or anything like that. There's a few things that are underneath those statements people don't realize that actually are hateful and harmful and do come from a place of hate, even if they don't realize it's hate. Because a lot of people think hate means violence. Like, I hate you means I want to cut your head off. But it doesn't mean violence. Hate means that you don't see that person as equal to you. You don't respect them as a human being. You see them as inferior to you. You might not equate that with hate. You might think, well, that's just the way it is, But it isn't. And it's not supposed to be. Another statement people make, and I'm going to come back to that, quote, 4% or 1% or 2% or whatever percentage they throw out there. They'll say things like, well, I don't care if you have queer people on TV or in movies, as long as kids don't have to see it, because kids don't need to know about sexuality. Something to that effect. Which you might think is an innocent statement, especially if you're coming from, I'm not going to say politically conservative, but I'm going to say socially conservative standpoint. If you're one of those people who's reserved about sexuality, you like keep it to yourself, or you don't like public displays of affection, period, of any kind, things like that. There are socially conservative people that aren't necessary, and I don't mean socially like politically like conservative, like, they don't want equal rights for others. They just, they're, you would, a derogatory term you could apply to this person would be a prude, but that's not necessarily the case. They're just someone who, for whatever reason, just wants to keep certain things private, and that's fine. So, I want to talk to the person with those sensibilities who doesn't realize why that statement is harmful, and let's unpack it. So, let's go with the public displays of affection. You don't want to see 2 gay people holding hands or kissing or making out or, performing adult scenes in a movie or television series. because you think it'll harm the children. Now, usually the person who, now I'm not going to say always, but usually the person who is against that, for whatever reason, is okay with seeing, a man and a woman, a straight couple holding hands or kissing or hugging or, doing the adult stuff. And that's where the problem comes from. If you're asexual like I am, or you're sensitive, or, we'll go back to that word prude just for a second, and I'm going to erase that word and replace it with, we'll say, socially conservative, or at least sexually conservative, I guess, maybe. So let's say you're socially conservative, but we're not saying conservative in the Fox News media definition of the word conservative. Remember, I studied political science. I have to put that out there, and I also studied linguistics in college, and the word conservative has multiple meanings depending on context, as do most words in the English language. Because a lot of people don't realize this, but English is kind of a hodgepodge of like 7 other languages just all competing with one another for dominance, and none of them are really dominant. 1,000 years ago, there was no English language. It was barely a dialect of German. But that's neither here nor there. So when I say conservative in this context, I don't mean waving the red flag, voting for Trump, USA, go, gun rights and all that bullshit. I just mean someone who is, reserved, might be a better word. So let's say you're one of those people who are reserved and you don't want to see any public displays of affection. You're like, look, I want my, movies, my kids' movies to be like the old Disney movies from the 50s. I don't want to see couples holding hands. I don't want to see them kissing of any couple in film or television or whatever. Those people do have a valid issue and a complaint, or I guess I should say stance. But it's too late for that. The cat's out of the bag, the genie's out of the bottle. You're going to see people kissing and holding hands on TV. So at best you can do is try to avoid it, but you can't regulate it. You can't tell people that people that want to see that they can't make movies and TV shows to cater to your sensibilities, because let's be real, you're actually the minority, even though you think you're not. Because the majority of people just don't care. Most people just, they see it in a movie, especially like a rom-com or a romantic drama, and they're okay with it. And I'm not talking about sex scenes. I'm talking about just holding hands or kissing or just being, presented as a couple. Now, but there are people who are like, well, it's okay to show, a mom and a dad holding hands because you don't have to teach your kids about I don't want to teach. They say this. They say, yeah, I just don't want to tell my kids about the homosexual lifestyle because I don't want to have to teach them about sodomy or butt fucking or whatever. Okay, but if you see a man and a woman holding hands, you don't have to teach your kids about blowjobs or having, giving head either. So that's not a valid criticism. When you see a man and a woman walking down the street holding hands, your kids just know that's a couple. They don't know what goes on in the bedroom. They don't know how how the babies are made. They don't need to know. It's the same thing if they see 2 men or 2 women holding hands, or 2 non-binaries holding hands, or 2 gender fluid people holding hands, or whatever, any combination thereof. You don't have to tell them what they do in the bedroom. If they say, "Mommy, why are those 2 men holding hands?" You just say, "Well, you know how some people have mommies and daddies? Well, some people have 2 daddies, some people have 2 mommies," and that's it. That's all you got to say. Kids are smart enough to leave it alone. They're not going to dig deeper because kids aren't, going to school and saying, what's a mommy, what's a daddy, and where do babies come from, until somebody tells them or they hear it. Just seeing a couple on TV or in television, even a cartoon, isn't going to, quote, program them or reprogram them or whatever, or make them biased one way or the other. It's not propaganda. So, if your complaint is you just don't want to have to teach kids about gay sex, you don't have to teach them about sex at all. Because they're going to see male and female couples in movies and TV shows. They're going to see Jasmine and Aladdin flying around on the carpet, singing, whatever that song is, holding hands and kissing and, The fireworks shoot up into the sky, and you don't have to tell them what happens, in the bedroom. They don't ask that question. They don't need to know until they're older. Same thing if they see two men or two women or whatever walking down the street. If it was Aladdin and Adam instead of Aladdin and Jasmine, you just be like, oh, cool. These are two people that are in love. Whatever. That's all you have to teach your kids. This is where the bigotry comes in. Because if your issue is you just don't want your kids to know about gay people at all, you don't want to have to teach them that, because even if you remove the sexual component, which if you're projecting sex into LGBT people and spaces, that's your perverted that's your perverted brain. That's not us. We're not the ones doing that. That's your projection, and that's where the bigotry comes in and where the harm comes from. Because what you're doing is you're telling a kid who might potentially be queer that it's a shame to be queer, that you need to hide it, you shouldn't be out in public. And what that does is that makes them feel bad about themselves. It makes them question themselves. It makes them scared to come out to people. It makes them scared to be themselves. It makes them scared to ask questions. And it makes them scared to live. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes, statistically speaking, a more than significant number of them don't make it to adulthood because they lose their battle to suicide. Because they don't see a path forward. That's why it's harmful. And when we tell people this, they get all up in arms. Now, some people, and I'm coming at this from the perspective of those who are just pure ignorant, who don't know. And I'm trying to educate. I'm not pushing an agenda. By the way, the queer agenda is literally just fucking equality. We just want to be left alone. We want to live our lives. That's the goddamn agenda. We're not pushing anything on anybody. And I can prove that. Because this is the other complaint that they make. They say, well, if kids see it, that, trans people on TV or gay people on TV or whatever, they're going to question it, and that's going to, quote, turn them gay or make them curious, and then they're going to go explore things. First of all, if they're curious and they want to explore, that is perfectly okay, so you shouldn't have a problem with that, which is where the problem comes from. If you have a problem with them asking questions about gay people and gay lifestyles and non-binary and things like that, then you are a bigot. Because what you're saying is, my norm, what I consider to be normal, is right, and what I consider to not be normal is wrong. And again, you're projecting that onto your kids. You're pushing that onto them. And again, you're making them afraid and, anxious and a whole bunch of other bad things you really shouldn't be doing. Now, we're going to talk about the religious side of it in just a second, but we're just talking about level-headed people who don't necessarily have a religious basis for their, we'll just say learned but subtle bigotry that they don't even recognize as bigotry. And we're just going to talk about that, which is what I'm trying to educate people on, because we really need to be having these conversations, and we got to stop fucking avoiding it. And we can't just, block people who say ignorant things. We have to, have conversations and try to be civil with people so that they can at least learn and give people the benefit of the doubt and the opportunity to grow, which is what my goal here is. So here's why that's dangerous. Because what you're doing is you are making a judgment. And your judgment is my being, and I'm saying my being you, representing you. You're saying my being straight or cisgender or whatever is superior to being queer or gay or trans or whatever. Because you're like, yeah, this me is normal. That you is abnormal. Don't be that. That's abnormal. What you're doing is you are diminishing other human beings, which is the very definition of bigotry. You are saying, I'm superior to this other group of people. That is what bigotry is. It isn't just all about, I want to hang people from a tree and beat them with a stick. Yeah, that's the most extreme form of bigotry. But just diminishing them, dehumanizing them, othering them, treating them like they're not equal to you is bigotry. Even if you didn't realize that. So why is that harmful? We're gonna go through the whys are they harmful, and then we're gonna go through the what you can do to be better and how can we improve as a society. This is gonna, like I said, it's gonna be a long video. So let's go through some of the others real quick. The other one is people say, well, it's only an insignificant percentage of the people. They can deal with it. You know, they can, I don't want to see it because they're overrepresented or something to that effect. So the basis for their argument is, well, the vast majority of people are straight, so the vast majority of people on TV should be straight. But the vast majority of people on TV are straight. They are. Now, there's a couple of things I have to point out before we get into the numbers. The first thing I have to point out is we've been making films since the late 1800s, 1890s. We've had over 120 years of cinema. And during that time, we've only had about 25 to 30 years where queer people were even treated as people, which is an insignificant statistical percentage of the entirety of cinema. So you're already overrepresented. You, the straight people, are already overrepresented. You don't need additional representation. Kids are just naturally inundated with this belief and this representation of, you know, the straight norm, you know, the reproductive straight heterosexual norm. That is what's pushed down. That is the propaganda. That's what's shoved down their throats because they're constantly bombarded with it, and they're not allowed to see alternatives to question things, which is telling them either one, those alternatives don't exist, or are shameful, which again is othering and diminishing and dehumanizing these people, which I just mentioned is why it's problematic. So the other thing is the actual statistics, right? They're like, well, if there's only 4% of the population are trans, or 2%, or whatever the percentage is, then that's how many people should be trans on TV or whatever. Well, there's two ways I can go about this. Number one, we're not even 1% of the people in movies and television. We haven't even hit that yet. So your argument is bullshit. It is literal bullshit because you're saying we're overrepresented when we're not. There's maybe 100 trans people, period, in the last 30 years that trans people have been represented in movies and cinema. There's maybe 30 to 100 in that ballpark that have been accurately, fairly portrayed. Total worldwide. Outside of, like, I'm talking outside of, like, specific, you know, queer media, you know, like Logo or places, you know, where it's like, you know, specific targeted LGBT media, yeah. But I'm talking about the mainstream, like the broader mainstream media, you know, Hollywood in general, the networks in general, streaming platforms in general. There's not as many trans people in movies and television as you are being told there are. And even if every single TV show made starting today going forward had only one trans person on the cast, either main cast or a side character or just a walk-on, you know, extra for a bit role, one, that's still not overrepresentation. And two, it's still not significant enough to really matter. Who cares? Now, a lot of people say, I don't care if there's a queer person or an LGBT person or a gay or trans or whatever person in a movie or a TV show, as long as it serves the story and doesn't push the agenda. And here's that thing, that word, agenda. But I'm going to ask you then why are you okay with straight people being in a movie if it doesn't help the story? Because it doesn't always. Friday the 13th, part 4. Friday the 13th, part 4. The final chapter. A woman in her 20s is at a party with her boyfriend. And her boyfriend is basically ignoring her to dance with another woman. Depending on your perspective, cheating, but not necessarily cheating. But he is dancing with another woman at a party. and ignoring his basically date he took to the party. And she gets angry and leaves. Now, she's a straight woman, obviously. She's cisgender, obviously. So, how does this serve the story? She gets angry, goes for a walk in the woods, gets in a canoe, and she floats on the water. Nobody has a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. But as soon as she's outside, it's raining in the film, by the way, she's got at least 100 yards to walk from the house to the boat. She strips down to nothing. Pure butt-ass naked. To walk through the woods in the rain to get to the lake. Camera very, very definitively framed in a way that you see things that you know are not necessary to the story at all. Nobody fucking cares about that. That has nothing to do with the story, but people are like, well, that's okay. But it isn't okay. Or if it is okay, if that is okay, has nothing to do with the story, and it's just basically like, hey, you know, it's titillating or whatever, okay. Then just having a trans person in your movie, being a regular person, but just being portrayed as a regular person, shouldn't offend you. But if it does, that's where the bigotry comes from. That is bigotry, because again, you're setting yourself up as superior. If you're okay with that scene I just described, a, you know, single, young, attractive woman walking alone in the woods, in the dark, in the rain, by herself, buck-ass naked, for no reason at all, then you should be okay with a trans woman, you know, walking down the park holding hands with another trans woman. That shouldn't offend you. Shouldn't bother you at all. If it does, you have a problem. And that problem is bigotry. Because even if it's subliminal, even if it is subconscious and you're not aware of it, that's why this video exists, because I'm trying to make you aware of it. What you're doing is you're saying, well, yeah, it's okay for the gratuitous, you know, heterosexual sex, because in my mind, that's normal. But it's not okay for, you know, homosexual representation, because that's not normal, even if the homosexual representation isn't sexual. Because you're, one, you're making it sexual, and two, you're still projecting your life, your lifestyle, your sexuality, your, you know, existence as superior to this other. You're othering again, which is, you know, all kinds of bigotry and problematic. So, these are, you know, some of the issues we have, right? These are where, this is where the things actually are problematic. Now you're watching this video and you're learning something and you're open-minded and you're like, okay, those are points that nobody has been able to make to me because they've never been able to spell it out, because they just call me a bigot and then we get in a fight and we don't talk. So now you're asking the question, how can we be better, or what, you know, how can I change? So let's do the how can I change first. How can you personally change? The first thing you can do is just shut up about it. Just, if you see a trans person or a gay person on TV, don't even mention it. Don't even comment on it. Don't argue with people who do talk about it. Don't even bring it up. Let us bring it up. We have a right to bring it up because it matters to us, because it affects us. So when we post articles like, this is the first trans person in this type of situation, whatever, that's important to us, because that's telling other people in our community, you can also get there too someday, because now we've broken that barrier. You don't have to break down that barrier. That barrier was broken down for you 100,000 years ago by our ancestors. You don't have to break down that barrier. We do. Because for the past 100,000 years, we've had to live in fear for our very lives. Even still do to this day. And not just in, you know, third world countries and extremist countries. Even here in the U.S. So that's why it matters to us. Here's another thing you can do. Maybe you're afraid of the cancel culture. Maybe you're afraid of the right wing, the extremists, the very vocal extremists, the actual blowhard bigots, right? The obvious obnoxious bigots. You're afraid of them because you don't want to face their wrath. You don't want to be called woke or whatever, which, by the way, you shouldn't be bothered by that, because we're going to talk about woke in a minute, but that's a whole nother video. I'm going to have to do a whole nother video on what woke means, because people don't know what the fuck it means. Anyways, but here's the thing. What you could do is, like I said, don't call attention to it. If you see an LGBT person, a trans person, a gay person, or whatever, in a movie or a TV show, then just be like, cool. Oh, okay, it's just another character. Don't make a big deal out of it. Let us make a big deal out of it, because to us it's a big deal. To you, the reason why to you it shouldn't be a big deal is because to you, it should just be another person. Because that's what we're fighting for. For you to just see us as equals. For us, it's a big deal because we now have one of us who we can look to and say, they made it. That gives the rest of us hope. Maybe we can someday make it too. You don't have to worry about that. Like I said, Cro-Magnon Man was walking around waving his wing out in public and nobody said a goddamn thing about it. So, you're fine. Heterosexual sexual norms is fine. It's protected. It's overrepresented. You don't have to worry about people, not wanting to have kids. There's plenty of people out there that are going to want to have kids. Okay? We're fine. You don't have to worry about that. There's 8 billion people on this planet. If 4 billion of us died tomorrow in a catastrophic event, that's still more people on the planet than there was 300 years ago. So we're still safe. We're fine as a species. We're not going anywhere anytime soon. We're good. So, alright, let's get that out of the way. So then there's the quote, agenda, right? People say, well, I just don't want you guys promoting the agenda. If you just want to be out there and live your lives, that's fine. I just don't want to see it because that reminds me that you're there, and I don't need to be reminded. And see, that right there, that strain of thoughts is bigotry, right? But what is the agenda? Well, here's the agenda. You, cisgender, heterosexual, whatever, white, black, brown, whatever, we'll get into minorities in a second, because that's a whole other topic. We're well aware of the disparities between the races in this country. We already know about that. But let's just say you're heterosexual and you're cisgender. It doesn't matter which race or ethnicity you are. You're heterosexual, cisgender. You, from birth, the moment you come out of your mother's body, the doctor identifies you by whatever sex they assign you based on your genitals. And then your mom and your dad and all your aunts and uncles and cousins and everybody at the baby shower give you, quote, gender appropriate or gendered baby items to match whatever your genitals are. So if they say you're a boy, they identify you as a boy, then they're going to get you all blue stuff or stuff with football pictures on it, and they're going to get you basketballs and motorbikes and things like that, because they're going to try to program you to be like, this is what it means to be a boy, and then they're going to just shove that down your throat. That is propaganda. That's the agenda. You're the ones with the agenda. Your agenda is to keep things the way they are. That's called the status quo. The agenda is to maintain the status quo. And that's why you don't want things to change, because that lessens your sense of superiority to us, because it calls into question your own, life experiences, because then you have to, question what choices would you have made differently had you known about this, or that, or the other thing, which, could be a good thing. So, let's talk about that aspect of it a little bit. The gay agenda, as they call it, the queer agenda, the trans agenda, or whatever whatever adjective they want to throw in front of it. What is the agenda? Well, here's what the agenda is. You don't know what you are when you're born. You don't know. Nobody does. That little baby that has a penis when it's born, and everybody says it's a boy, and it grows up to be a boy, in its mind, might be a boy, and then he goes and lives his life as a boy. But when that baby is 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, that baby might think, you know what, I don't want to be a boy. Or I don't think I'm a boy. I don't feel right as a boy. I'd rather be a girl. Or I don't want to be a boy or a girl, or whatever. then that child, let's go with, they're born with a penis and they're shoved, propagated, propagandized, programmed. Boy, 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 boy. Boys like this, boys like this, boys like this. And they're 7 years old, they're in the first grade or second grade or whatever grade you're in at 7 years old. And they're, flipping through a picture book of National Geographic or whatever, Nickelodeon magazine or whatever, I don't know, or looking at a tablet or whatever they're doing. And they're looking at the girls and they're thinking, oh my God, those dresses look so pretty, I wish I could wear a dress. And they're thinking that in the back of their mind. They don't know why they want to wear a dress. They're just being told, they're just thinking in their mind that would just be cool. Now, this is what we want. This is what the agenda is. We want that kid to be able to go home and say, Mom, Dad, I'd like to try wearing a dress. Can I? And ideally, we want the parents to be supportive and say, you know what? Try it out. You don't have to push them. You don't have to twist their arm one way or the other. Just be like, you know what? Try it. See if you like it. And if you decide you don't, that's okay. And if you decide you do, that's okay too. Literally, the agenda is to just be okay, to just be able to live, to not be afraid. But here's what happens in reality. That 7-year-old is looking at pictures and they're like, I wish I could wear a dress. And they go home and they're like, well, they know that the guy on the news channel is always calling trans people bad words. They hear it, they see it, they know that that's out there. They maybe heard Dad say something about, I don't want, some fag in a dress going into the women's restroom. That's just not appropriate or whatever. They hear these things. And so the kid is like, I'm scared to tell Mom and Dad that I want to wear a dress. So this is what that kid does. They hide it. They either suppress those feelings, which they're going to fester. You cannot get rid of those feelings. They're going to fester, and they're going to suppress those feelings, and they're going to hide it. And what they're going to do is they're going to develop a fear of you as a parent or as a teacher or a politician or whatever, an adult, basically, an authority figure in their life. They're going to fear you, and they're going to withdraw from you. And they're going to grow distant from you. They might, because they're intelligent, they're smart, kids are smarter than you give them credit for, they might put on an act. They might realize, like, okay, I want to wear a dress and play with Barbies, but I know if my parents find out, they're going to beat the living snot out of me, or worse. So I'm going to put on an act. I'm going to join the Little League baseball team and wear the uniform and the ball cap and throw the ball and bat the ball and spit and chew bubble gum like I'm supposed to, like a, quote, good boy, and do all the things I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to overcompensate. And this makes them, because they do overcompensate, and they realize very quickly, I'm going to point this out, this is one of the things that we have a problem in our society, they very quickly figure out that masculinity equals toxic masculinity. And so while there is pressure on straight cisgender males to adhere to the social norms of toxic masculinity, there's also pressure on them to, be open-minded and maybe be respectful and things like that. So it's sort of like a double standard, but we're making attempts to make progress. So the straight kid, we're going to use a little simplified terminology just to make this conversation easier and more palatable. Some of this terminology is going to be a little outdated. I'll tell you the alternatives as we go along, and I'll try to update you on what terminology you should probably be using as we go along and why you should be using that terminology. And I'm using the word should, not that you need to or have to. I'm just telling you these are things that would make us feel comfortable and feel more inclusive and safe around you, which is the whole point of this type of more inclusive language, which is a whole other video for a whole other day, but we're going to get there when we get there. So, alright, but the gay boy or the trans girl who has to pretend to be a boy figures out that, okay, the other boys are jerks. I have to be extra jerk. It's not just enough that I be male. Now they have to see me as alpha male. because that's the only way I can fit in is I have to deflect. I can't let there be any doubt or ambiguity or anything. I've got to deflect. And so that kid becomes one of the worst examples of toxic, misogynist masculinity you're ever going to find. And they overcompensate. They only watch male-themed action movies and wrestling and male-dominated sports, and they go out of their way to be seen doing male-associated activities like mowing the lawn or hunting or whatever. Even if they personally hate these things and have no interest in these things, they will go out of their way to put on a performance for you. Are you really okay with that? Because if you are, you're a bigot. This is where you should have some empathy, some compassion. You should be like, I didn't know that's why it's harmful. Because this kid should be able to go home and tell their parents, I think I want to wear a dress and play with Barbies and whatever. And the parents should be opening and then let the kid put on a dress. And let the kid decide for themselves, you know what? I was wrong. This doesn't feel right. Okay. No harm, no foul. Or you know what? This feels right. This is me. Okay. Then they take the next step. They want to grow their hair longer. They want to try, pigtails. They want to paint their fingernails. They want to try lipstick. Maybe they want to play with a Barbie. They want to try changing their name or their pronouns, and they want to go to school as a girl and be presented as a girl. Okay, they should be allowed to do that and not be hassled. Because then what's going to happen is not only are they not going to be afraid, and not only are they not going to put on that performance to deflect because they have to, because they're afraid, which is going to turn them into the worst kind of jerks, which is what we call projection, but that's a topic for another day. Not only that, but they're also going to be better people. They're going to be happier people. And they're going to grow up and be productive members of society instead of being a recluse or a mess. They're not going to have as many neuroses. They're not going to have as many mental health issues and as much, trauma. And they're probably not going to be suicidal, at least for these things. I mean, other things could happen in their life that you and I and nobody else has any control over. Mom dies in a car accident, or, school shooting, on Tuesday in the cafeteria. Things happen. Those are the things you can't control. All right. That's trauma everybody faces equally. You shouldn't be subjecting them to additional unnecessary trauma that is very easily avoidable. Now, we're not going to get into the weeds into the Bible. I'm just going to say two things about the Bible. I'm not going to be dismissive of it, but I'm going to say two things about the Bible that you have to recognize. And I don't care what you believe about the Bible. There are two facts about the Bible you have to accept as actual facts. Fact number one, there are 40,000 Christian denominations in the United States alone. None of them agree on what the Bible says or means. You do not know what the Bible says. Period. You do not have the authority to read the Bible and quote it to anybody, because unless you are a legit, actual Bible scholar who's educated and studied these ancient languages and studied these ancient cultures and studied these ancient texts and everything else, you do not have the authority to just pick a verse out of the Bible and say, well, it says this, therefore I believe this. You do not have that authority. I don't have that authority. Nobody fucking does. There are Christians that read the entire Bible as an allegory. None of it's historical to them. There are other Christians that read every word of it as literal historical fiction. It's not, or historical documentary or whatever. It's not. Historical nonfiction is what I meant to say. It's not. It's not a historical document. It isn't. And that's fact number two. It is not a historical record. It isn't. It is a book of mythology. Some people believe that mythology to be based on historical accounts. If you believe that, it's your right to believe so. It's my right not to believe so. You cannot prove that it isn't mythology. I cannot prove that it is. Neither one of us can prove anything that's in the Bible because we weren't there when it was written. And we don't know what the original intent was. Was it meant to be allegory? Was it meant to be literal? Because there's a lot of it, more of it than you realize, that was written anonymously that we know nothing about the author. So, and I'm going to go ahead and throw a third point out there just for fun. There's a lot of things in the Bible that contradict other things in the Bible. So, the reason why I'm pointing this out isn't because I'm telling you can't be Christian or you're stupid or wrong or whatever. Look, I was a Christian for a lot of years. I was a Baptist minister. I went around evangelizing people and teaching Sunday school, and I was a Bible counselor at Vacation Bible School and Bible Camp, and I was starting churches. I know the damn Bible. I'm not an expert. Nobody is. But I do know that you can put 200 Christians in a room, anywhere in the world, and you're not going to get two of them that agree on anything. They'll all agree that Jesus was the Son of Man, but you're not going to get two of them that will agree on what the Son of Man means, or what it means to follow Jesus, or what it means to be a, quote, true Christian. You're not going to get any of them to agree on should you or should you not be baptized, should you or should you not eat pork, should you or should you not pay taxes, etc., etc. You can't get two Christians anywhere in the world to come together and agree on anything. You can't do it. So stop saying with, quote, heirs of authority, quit acting like you are the authority on the Bible when you're not. Alright? I'm not attacking you for liking the Bible, and I'm not diminishing the Bible itself. I'm not disparaging it. I'm not calling it rubbish or anything like that. What I'm saying is, you can't use it as the basis of anything. Alright? Not even, well, especially not the basis for laws, because we're not a theocracy in the United States of America. But we're not going to get into that. We're not even going to talk about we're not a Christian nation, because we're not. We're going to save that for a whole nother video. Maybe I don't even tackle that topic. Maybe I don't even bother with it. But here's what we are going to say. Alright? Here's what we are going to say. It doesn't matter. Because, regardless if being trans is a sin or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't justify hate. It doesn't. It doesn't. Because, hear me out. Pay attention. This is the most important part of the video. Jesus, according to the Bible, hung out with a prostitute. And he didn't throw rocks at her. He didn't spit on her. He didn't deny her human rights. He didn't call her a whore. He treated her like a regular person and showed her respect. And among his teachings was to do the same. Just treat people with respect. One verse in the Bible in particular, I'm not quoting it, I'm paraphrasing it. But it is something to the effect of, love your neighbor like love yourself, and love God with all your heart. And if you do these two things, you've kept the whole law. Something to that effect. Now, we could argue over who's under the law, who's not under the law, all day long. Or what does it mean to be under the law? Is the law fulfilled all day long? You could argue that all day long. Christians have been arguing that since the beginning of time. Or at least since the beginning of Christianity, I should say. Obviously, Christianity hasn't been around since the beginning of time. People forget that. But anyways, alright. But it doesn't matter. Because regardless if something is a sin or not, you're still supposed to treat them like people. Period. Now, there's a passage somewhere in the Bible. I'm not going to quote it. I'm not going to look it up. It's in one of the Pauline letters. Galatians, Ephesians, Galatians, Colossians, I don't remember which one. But it's one of the Pauline letters. And it's a list of sins. And it's a list of sins that will condemn you to hell, according to the author, which was, I believe, Paul. Or St. Paul, depending on which version of Christianity you're in. Protestantism or Catholicism. But anyways, Paul says that this whole list of sins. All liars and all cheaters, and all XYZ, murderers, adulterers. A whole list of sinners that will have their part in the lake of fire. Okay, Here's the basic tenet of Christianity. I was a Baptist minister. I taught this in Sunday school. I taught it in vacation Bible school. I taught it on Sunday school. And I taught it from the pulpit when I was preaching and knocking on people's doors. This is how you evangelize. You tell people to quote the good news, the gospel. This is what you tell people. All these things are sin. Here's a list of sins. But the good news is you don't have to be guilty of your sin. Jesus will forgive you. All right, so we're not getting into the religion, but this is the gist of it. I'm not going to quote the Bible at you, but I'm going to give you the gist of what Christianity teaches, or at least, evangelical Christianity teaches, because it does teach. I was a Baptist minister, which is one of the most prominent evangelical branches of Christianity, so I know this stuff really good. My dad was a deacon. Okay? I'm not just making this shit up. This is what Baptists do believe about the Bible. They believe that you're supposed to be compassionate towards the sinners. This is why we have ministries where we go into prisons and we preach to drug addicts. Because you're supposed to have compassion for the sinner, right? Compassion for the sinner. Now, we're not arguing whether trans or gay is a sin or not. We're not having that discussion. We're just arguing, even if we assume it is a sin, let's just pretend for the sake of argument it is. I'm not saying it is, but for the sake of this illustration, for me making my point, let's assume it is. Okay? Even if it is, so what? Being a drug addict, according to the Bible, or certain interpretations of the Bible, I will clarify, is also a sin. Being drunk, according to some interpretations of the Bible, is a sin. According to the Baptist Church, dancing in public is a sin. But we're not going to go there. Especially the Southern Baptist Church. Whew. Anyways, you can basically make the Bible say anything as a sin if you want to, if you try hard enough. I had a friend who told me that playing Nintendo was a sin because if you're not spending your time playing the Bible, reading the Bible, anything you're doing is a sin. So if you're not reading the Bible, whatever you are doing is automatically a sin. That's an extreme view of what is and isn't a sin. But we're not talking about that. How do you treat the sinner? Well, we know from the examples of the apostles and the early church and Jesus himself, you're supposed to feed the poor. You're supposed to go to the prisons and minister to the criminals, those who have been convicted of crimes and sentenced to jail or whatever. You're supposed to help the elders, the widows. You're supposed to take care of them. No, it doesn't go into the specifics of what that means necessarily, and people have disagreements on what constitutes a widow and an elder, etc., etc., because some churches, a 19-year-old can be considered an elder. I'm looking at you, LDS. Anyways, we're pushing all that aside for a second. What's the basic core tenet of Christianity? It doesn't matter if you're Baptist or Catholic or whatever. Your core tenet is compassion. You're supposed to, you can, depending on which branch of Christianity you fall under, have sympathy for the sinner, or you can have empathy for the sinner. But either or, you should still treat them with compassion and kindness. This is a tenet that is taught in every branch of Christianity. Doesn't matter what the sin is, all sinners are supposed to be treated with compassion and love and empathy or sympathy, one or the other. But at the bare minimum, compassion. Not hate, not bigotry. Do you see where I'm going with this? So, even if you say, well, I don't have a problem with being gay or whatever, it's just the sin itself, right? I don't have a problem with the sinner, I have a problem with the sin itself. Okay, and then you're going to go and say, I just don't want to see it on TV. Because let's take it back to, I don't want to see it on TV because it's a sin. Okay, so you don't want to watch CSI because there's murder and rape and theft in CSI. You don't want to watch Superman because Lex Luthor is a corrupt banker who is using a nuclear bomb to blow up California so that he can make worthless desert land that he invested in worth millions. You don't want to watch that. You don't want to watch Spider-Man because there's criminals in Spider-Man. There's a guy who point blank shoots a guy and murders him point blank. Because that's a sin, right? You don't want to see it, right? You don't want to see sin. So you can't watch TV at all. Period. Because you cannot watch television in this country without observing sin. So if your argument for I don't want to see trans people or gay people on TV is because it's a sin, and I just don't want to be in the presence of sin, then you can't watch TV at all. Period. Congratulations. You are Amish. Go be Amish. Because having sex out of wedlock is a sin. Oops, you can't watch any movie. You can't watch Friends. You can't watch How I Met Your Mother. You can't watch Stranger Things. You can't watch Sabrina the Teenage Witch. There's a bajillion TV shows you can't... Well, basically, I can't think of a single TV show you can watch if you're not allowed to watch adultery. Or what some people interpret as to mean adultery. Depending on your interpretation of the Bible. There's some who argue some of this stuff is allegory and otherwise. But, the bare bones, you can't watch movies that depict adultery because adultery is a sin. Adultery is one of the sins in the Ten Commandments. So, even you can ignore all the other lists anywhere else in the Bible, Galatians, Ephesians, Romans, etc., etc., etc. You can't ignore the Ten Commandments. That's the foundation of the entire religion. Even Jesus kept the Ten Commandments. So, let's use those. Well, lying is actually one of the Ten Commandments. So you can't, if you're a Christian, you can't vote for Donald Trump because he is a convicted liar. He's been caught lying multiple times. So you're voting for a sinner if you vote for Donald Trump. Okay, that's an extreme, projection, but that's exactly my point. It's all extreme. But I'm going to go back to, if your reason why you can't watch a movie or a TV show that has a gay person in it just being normal, because that normalizes sin, then you can't watch a movie or a TV show that has a bank robber in it. You can't watch a movie or a TV show that has a racist cop wrongfully planting evidence and convicting people of crimes they didn't commit, because that's a sin. That's corruption and, lying and all kinds of other things. You can't watch any movie with U.S. soldiers in it because killing is a sin. That's in the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not kill. That's like at the top of the list. So you can't watch any of the Marvel movies. You can't watch any of the you can't watch Schindler's List. You can't watch you can't play Call of Duty video games. You can't watch anything with guns in it, with killing in it. We're not even going to go into horror movies or anything like that. And you certainly can't watch movies like Bad Boys, where cops are killing people I shouldn't say innocent people, but they're killing unconvicted killers. Criminals that haven't been convicted yet. That's a crime. And according to most Christians, breaking the law is a sin, because there's a passage, and I'm paraphrasing, but there's a passage that says, observe the laws of the land. It's one of Paul's tenets, I believe. It could be Peter. I can't remember off the top of my head. Those two are easy to confuse. But it basically says, if it's against the law and you break the law, regardless of what the law is, you have committed a sin. So that means if you're not wearing your seatbelt, you're a sinner. If you're driving 32 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour speeding zone, you're a sinner. You see what I'm getting at? The point is, why? Ask yourself this. Why is being trans or gay a separate sin from all other sins? Why is this one sin, which again, I'm not saying it's a sin. I'm just saying in your mind it is. Okay, even if in your mind it is, why is that one sin the most egregious sin of all? But you're okay with watching movies with literal pedophiles in them? You're okay with watching movies with literal rapists in them? Liars, murderers, drug addicts, etc., etc. Those are the extreme sins that are listed in the Ten Commandments, without even getting into the ones I just mentioned. Jaywalking and speeding and, changing lanes without using your turn signal, etc., etc. Those are all technically sins according to most Christian denominations. So if you can't watch movies or TV shows that depict sin, or you can't watch movies and TV shows because they depict gay people because being gay is a sin, you can't watch any movie or any TV show that depicts any sin, which means you can't watch any movie or any TV show that has ever been made in the history of movies and television. Because there's always at least one, quote, sin depicted in every piece of media ever presented, and there always will be. Especially if you're one of those who has an extreme view of what sin is. Now, you're gonna justify it, and you're gonna come back with, well, the Bible does say that we're supposed to separate ourselves from the world. Okay, yes, that is true, but what does that even fucking mean? What is the, quote, the world? Well, that is a passage that people argue over, but we're gonna set that aside for a second. Let's take the basest definition of what is the world. I was taught that basically just means you have the church, and everything outside the church is the world, is essentially what it boils down to. This was where my friend justified saying anything that, like playing Nintendo was a sin because Nintendo was from outside, was quote, of the world. Okay, so again, if you can't watch movies and TV shows because being gay is a sin and being gay is, quote, of the world, well, everything I just said still applies. You can't watch any movies and TV shows because they're all of the world. And they all depict sin. So, again, you have to be Amish. You can't go at Disney and say, I want to watch your movies, even though I'm compromising my faith on all these other things. I'm just going to ignore all this so-called sin and enjoy the movie for what it is, but have an issue with there being a gay or trans person because that's a supposedly egregious sin. Like, for some reason, that one sin is elevated above all the others, which, by the way, even in the muddy texts that you could interpret, and I'm going to say interpret, as condemning transgender or gay people as sinners, which I'm not going to say they are or they aren't, even in those texts where that is allegedly what people, the text people reference, those are not in the Ten Commandments, and those aren't in the Sermon on the Mount. Those were not important enough, even if they are technically sins. They're the kind of sin that was so minuscule to Jesus, to God, to Yahweh, that he didn't even put it in the list. Now, Joshua, Yahweh, thought that having sex when you're not married, gay or straight, just having sex, period, when you're not married, is so terrible, it has to be in the Ten Commandments. Joshua, Yahweh, whatever you want to call him, didn't say anything about gay sex. Alright? Now, you could argue, well, marriage is between a man and a woman. It doesn't say that anywhere in the Bible either, but let's push that aside for a second. We're not even going to get into that. But, because that is one of the arguments they use. They're like, well, even if being gay isn't a sin, having sex outside of marriage is a sin, and you can't have gay marriage. So that's one of the reasons why they're against gay marriage, by the way. Because as soon as they allow gay marriage, that gets rid of the loophole. Because now they've got one less tenet to stand on to justify their hate. You get what I'm going with this? Anyways, alright. Now, I'm just going to throw a couple of things out there that, in fact, I'm going to read it. I'm going to actually read it to you, the actual verse. Because I want, this is the most important part. Here we go. Deuteronomy 22. This is the verse that they used to condemn us. Alright. Deuteronomy 22. And this is from the, I'm going to read the King James Version and a couple of other different versions, so you get different versions of it. It says, "The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all who do so are abomination unto the Lord thy God." It doesn't tell us what that garment means or how you identify garment, but we're going to push that aside. This is the American Standard Version, same verse. "A woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto it," same verse, same wording. Let's find a different. Let's find the NIV. See how that reads. Where's the NIV? NIV. "A woman must not wear men's clothing, nor a man wear women's clothing, for the Lord your God detests anyone who does this." Okay, so this is the verse that people use to justify their, either their bigotry towards trans people or that trans people are a sin. Well, it's talking about cross-dressing. It's not talking about trans people, but that's neither here nor there. Now, I'm going to look up Deuteronomy 21, the chapter before. Here we go. This is the chapter before that verse. Deuteronomy 21. This is in the same area, the law, the list of things you're not supposed to do. "If someone is found slain, lying in a field in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess, and is not known who the killer is, your elders and judges shall go out and measure the distance from the body to the neighboring towns. Then the elders of the town nearest the body shall take a heifer that has never been worked and has never worn a yoke, and lead it down to a valley and has not been plowed," blah, blah, blah. What I'm saying is there's a lot of bullshit, random stuff that has nothing to do with anything. I'm gonna try. Okay. What I'm getting at, even as when I was a Baptist, what I'm getting at is, even if you believe the Bible is, the Word of God and everything in this Levitical, Deuteronomical, the law, basically the old Deuteronomical law, even if you believe that all is that list of everything is a sin, right? You could argue over what is and isn't a sin. Well, there's a whole lot of stuff in there that we don't do. Now, why don't we do those things, or why don't they pertain to us? Well, this is very easy. In the New Testament, Peter said, we're not under the law anymore. You've been set free from the law. You're no longer bound by the law. You can eat pork now. It's okay. You can drink now. It's okay. You don't have to go sit in a hole outside the city to menstruate. It's okay. These things changed when Jesus died on the cross, which means, theoretically, it should be okay for a man to wear a dress, if that verse is telling us that a man can't wear a dress. Because that passage in the law has been nullified. That is literally what Christianity teaches. Everybody I know, preachers, deacons, everybody I know that was in authority, used that tenet, that teaching, to justify eating pork. Now, Peter didn't want to eat pork. Jesus or an angel or somebody came to him in a dream, I can't remember the details, came to him in a dream and said, here's a blanket full of animal, and it was all unclean animals. And he said, eat, partake, and enjoy. And Peter was like, no, I can't. That's unclean animals. And God had to basically argue with Peter and say, what I've made clean, you cannot call unclean. And there's other passages in Romans and other places that basically amount to this. You're not under the law anymore. So that all those lists of things that were sins don't apply. And again, Jesus said the whole law can be summed up in this. The entire law can be summed up in this. Love your neighbor as yourself, and love God with your whole heart. That's it. So you could, and this is how a lot of Christians get away with justifying anything they want whenever they do something that somebody says, well, that's a sin. They're like, nah, because Jesus said this. Okay, so which is it? Is everything a sin or nothing a sin? You cannot have it both ways. Now, regardless, nearly every branch of Christianity teaches that if you say the magic words, if you say, it's the Romans road. Basically, if you acknowledge that God is the Father and Jesus is the Son, and Jesus was perfect and God raised him from the dead, and you say with your mouth and believe in your heart, Jesus is Lord, you shall be saved. I'm paraphrasing again, but that's the Romans road to salvation. Every evangelical Christian knows the Romans road to salvation. You say the magic words, you're saved once. The blood washes over you metaphorically, or metaphysically, supernaturally, whatever, and you're clean. Your name's written in the book of life. You are guaranteed a reservation in heaven. There's nothing you can do to lose it. Okay, so then what does it matter if a person is gay or straight? Or you could go to the extreme. What does it matter if a person is a child molester or an enslaver or a murderer or, a serial killer or whatever? Well, it doesn't. In the eyes of God, it doesn't matter. Your sins have been washed away, and all sins are equal. Remember, Jesus even said that there is no sin that is one sin greater than another. And also, he even said, to illustrate that, which is another verse that Christians love to use against us, is even if you look at a woman in lust, you have already committed adultery with her in your heart. So do you see the contradictions? There's so many contradictions. This is why Christians can't agree on anything. And I'm saying this is someone who used to be an actual Baptist minister, who used to go around tying the Bible up in knots, trying to twist people into believing what I was told that they were supposed to believe. Even internally knowing I was harming myself in the process. Okay, so how do you as a non-Christian reconcile this? Before we come back to how do you as a Christian reconcile this? Because I'm talking to both of you at the same time. If you're not a Christian, how do you reconcile it? Well, you basically tell the Christian to shut up. It doesn't matter. Keep your beliefs to yourself. That's what you do. You don't have to be rude about it. You can very politely say, look, I respect your beliefs, but please respect mine and don't push yours on me. I won't push mine on you. I'm a pagan. I'm not going to tell you you have to make sacrifices to Lilith, the queen of hell, the bride of Satan, the mother of demons, because you, as a follower of Jesus, aren't going to do that. No matter how many times I tell you to do it. I am. Because I do worship Lilith. Not exclusively, but anyways. Okay, so that's how you as the non-Christian reconciles that. Like I said, you just treat people like people. All people the same. You're not okay with being racist, right? Nobody sees, Morgan Freeman in a movie and like, statistically speaking, there's not enough black people in the world for Morgan Freeman to be in this movie because there needs to be more white people to keep the math accurate. Nobody says that. But if, I don't know, trying to think of a gay icon who isn't dead. Lady Gaga. I don't know if she's gay, but she's a gay icon. But let's say Lady Gaga's playing a gay character in a movie. Why is Lady Gaga playing a gay character in this movie? The statistically insignificant proportion of the population shouldn't be overrepresented. Okay, if you're not going to say the same thing about a black man, why are you saying it about a trans woman or a gay woman or a gay man? Think about that. Because it is literally the same thing. Now, we're not even going to go into the what is choice and what isn't, and are you born this way, are you not? We're going to leave that alone. We're just going to assume that it is what it is, and we're just going to assume that it's not important. It doesn't matter if it's a choice or it isn't a choice. It doesn't matter. If a person is gay, it doesn't matter if it's a choice or it isn't a choice. To us it does, to you it doesn't. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't change anything on your end. It doesn't change anything for you. Okay? So, alright. Now let's go back to if you're a Christian, and you're a legit good Christian, right? The reason you knock on doors on Sunday afternoons and hand out pamphlets is because you have a bleeding heart. You genuinely care about people and don't want them to go to hell. You're a genuine good Christian, and you're fed up with people calling you a bigot because you don't want to see trans people on TV or in movies, right? Okay, now I've given you plenty of reasons previously why you should be okay with us being on TV, or if you're not okay with us being on TV, you shouldn't have a TV in the first place. I've already given you all that. So let's go with how do you as a Christian reconcile all of this? There's one passage that I'm going to quote, and it's sort of a quote, not a direct quote, but it's also kind of a paraphrase, but not a true paraphrase. But it's basically, judge not, lest ye be judged. Now, we could argue over what does that mean all day long, but here's the thing. You know Jesus said that. You've read Matthew where he said it. You've read the gospel. You know that it's repeated in, I think, Ephesians or Corinthians or one of the, or maybe Galatians. You know it's repeated in the New Testament. You know it is. Okay, so you know as a Christian, you've been taught that because you've been told your whole life you're not supposed to judge people. Because when you call out one of your fellow Christians for one of their sins, that's the first verse they throw in your face. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Okay, so you do not have a right to judge us. According to your own religion, you do not have a right to judge us. Period. Even if we are a sin or a sinner or whatever, you're still supposed to treat us the same as the non-sinner, because remember Jesus said, he who has no sin, throw the first stone, because everybody's a sinner. That's literally in the Romans Road. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. That's the very first verse in the Romans Road to salvation. Okay? Every Christian knows the Romans Road to salvation. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. All. You, Christian, have also sinned. Remember? That's why Catholics have confession. Do you want to go on Twitter and confess your sins publicly? Not likely. Okay, so when it's all said and done, what are we left with? The only reason for you to have a problem with us is bigotry. Because we have stripped away all other reasons, justifications for not wanting to see us in movies and TV shows. I have negated every single one of them. You no longer have a justifiable, logical reason to not want to see us represented in movies and TV shows. What you're left with is bigotry. Now, are you okay with that? Because if you are, then you're going to have to be okay with us calling you a bigot. That's what it is. If you're not okay with that, what can you do about it? Well, like I said previously, way earlier in this video, just stop bringing it up. Stop talking about it. Don't let it bother you. You could also be an ally. If you see somebody say, oh my God, they're pushing the agenda, you could link to them this video and say, hey, watch this. She knows what she's talking about. She actually is pretty smart. Or you could just say, you know what? And then you could quote any one of the Bible verses I gave you. Judge not lest you be judged, or whatever. You don't have to preach a whole sermon at them, but you could give them the basic tenets that you all agree on or live by. That's all we're asking. That is literally the, quote, agenda. To just be treated like equals. Treat our lifestyles, whether it's a choice or not, treat our lifestyles and our choices that we do make, who we choose to sleep with or fall in love with or kiss or hug or whatever, spend our time with, how we choose to dress and present ourselves, the activities we choose to participate in, whatever. Let us have our own lives. Leave us alone. Just let us live. Just treat us like we're the same as you. You don't have to like drag. You don't have to go to a drag show. But you don't have to go out of your way to stop others from enjoying it either. I do not like baseball. I hate it, in fact. I do not go to the baseball stadium with a picket fence or a picket sign and march up and down screaming at people, baseball is bad, don't play baseball. No, I just leave it alone. If you want to enjoy baseball, go enjoy baseball. If somebody else wants to enjoy drag, let them. If somebody else wants to enjoy, if a guy, male, maybe gay, maybe not, wants to paint their nails, let them. Stop worrying about other people. Because at the end of the day, what the fuck does it matter? How the fuck does it affect you? Seriously, at the end of the goddamn day, what does it fucking hurt you if I wear a dress? How does that hurt you? It fucking doesn't. That's why we get angry. That's why we have Pride Month. And that's why representation matters. Now, I'm going to have to do a whole nother video later on the whole what can we do to make representation fair and accurate, because that's another problem. Because problematic representation is worse than no representation at all. Stay cool.